So this is a slideshow to basically explain the structure of the research paper that you'll be doing in my class. The research paper that you're writing for me this year is a paper that you're doing research to gather information for, but it is the type of paper that is persuasive, okay? You are arguing that your reader or people in general should take some specific course of action based upon what you have read and researched. You're describing an issue in such a way that your reader should agree with you that this is the best thing that we can do right now. This is called a persuasive argument. The important thing about a persuasive argument is that it's based upon reliable sources, and you must address the opposition. If you don't talk about people who disagree or talk about points of view that are different from what you are taking, then basically that means your argument is very weak. If you address the opposition, it strengthens your argument. So, there are three basic components to a persuasive argument. There's definition, evaluation, and proposal. Okay? Each of these components is designed intentionally to do something, to define or evaluate or propose. Okay? And done in this order, they present a reasonable progression through an idea, through a research idea. You will find information that supports each of these three, and by doing that, your paper will be persuasive. Now, each of these three may face opposition. Well, we'll talk about the opposition in just a minute. Since you are not, in fact, an expert in the field, you are gathering information from the experts in the field. You need to have sources for each of these three bits of your paper. Each of your sources might have one or two or all three of these components. It might be completely dedicated to one of the components, maybe solutions for the problem, proposals. It might be completely dedicated to defining the problem. Different sources have different levels of these three components. Your paper will have all three components to some extent so that you can then add to the conversation. You are basically bringing me in with your point of view so that I understand what you have found. But in order to do this, you need sources. Let's look at what these three are specifically and talk about opposition. So, definition means what's actually happening. These are the facts of the issue. What are the numbers? What are the causes? What are the effects? You can't assume that your reader understands all the facts about an issue, or assume that they know even some of the words that you use to identify what's going on. Some of the explanations that you have read use vocabulary they won't know. You need to identify the situation. What is the thing that's happening? That is part of what you do with definition. Now, good sources won't only teach you about the definition or the three components, they'll also introduce opposition to each of them, which is what you're going to do when you explain it to me. So what does opposition look like when it is dealing with the definition component? Well, opposition to definition is doubting that the event actually is taking place. Is something really happening? Extreme examples would be like Holocaust denying or flat Earth, or ideas that we don't have plate tectonics, or we don't have detailed evidence of past eons of biology or science. Okay, denying that the actual data is there. So, regarding definition, you should be able to identify reasonable people who define the situation and reasonable people who could oppose that definition. When we look at evaluation, evaluation is finding the value of something. In this case, value is sort of a negative, a negative indication. The importance when you evaluate a problem, you're saying the problem is bad. I've evaluated it and I've found that there is a flaw, that there is a damaging effect. Okay, we could have things happening by definition that we all agree with, but we may disagree whether or not they're actually bad, whether this is a bad thing. So, when we look at evaluation, what you look for in your sources is what is wrong with this happening? What are the damaging effects of what's going on? You'll be finding sources who say this is who is being harmed. This is how it is getting worse. This is why we should stop it. This is a bad thing. When it comes to opposition in the evaluation component, opposition looks like people who are doubting that it's a bad thing. People who are saying, okay, I agree that it's happening. The definition, yes, I can see this is occurring. But your evaluation is that this is a bad thing and we should stop. And mine is that it's not a bad thing. Okay? You will be able to find reasonable people in many cases who disagree about how bad some phenomenon is. This is how you deal with evaluation. If everyone agrees that it's a bad thing, or most everyone agrees that it's a bad thing, like child abuse, slavery, then this particular component, evaluation, won't be a place you'll find a lot of opposition. But imagine if it's something like global warming. People might say, well, yes, the Earth is warming up. The definition of the temperature going up is true. But is it a bad thing? Isn't that a good thing? Doesn't that mean that we will have more living space? Doesn't that mean we'll be able to, whatever their arguments are? Okay, this is the opposition to your evaluation that it's a bad thing. When we look at the component of proposal means this is something that we should do. It's proposal. It's in favor of doing something. What actions should be taken to combat this? You're finding sources that say this is the action that we should use that will have the most positive effect on this negative phenomenon. And in almost any issue that's worth trying to solve, you'll find that there are going to be many opinions about how to do it. Remember, in this section of your paper, you may present several different proposals, but you personally are going to be picking one that you're going to say is the best thing to do, the most useful thing for us to do at this stage. And that's where the idea of opposition comes in. Opposition in this component looks like people doubting that your idea is the best one. It is not the case that people are doubting that it happens. That's opposition to definition. It is not the case of people doubting whether this is a good or bad thing, doubting that it's a bad thing. That is in evaluation. This is more of a competition between sources. So, for example, if we agree, if when we read through your paper, it seems pretty obvious that there's global warming in your definition, it's bad, and that we should try and use electric cars to eliminate some of the CO2 gas or carbon monoxide gas even. Then you might have people who say, no, that's not the best way to do it. The best way to get around this is to have wind generation, wind farms, because the electricity that goes into your electric cars it's coming from a power plant. Don't start with changing your cars into battery operated cars. Start by changing where the electricity comes from. We should be doing windmills first. Then we'll worry about changing things over to electricity. You see how this is a competition between windmills versus electric cars. That's the type of opposition you see when you're dealing with the proposal section of your paper. So as you're thinking about your paper will have 3 parts, and they'll be in order. Okay? You'll have your definition, you'll have your evaluation, and they're in this order, although it's not 3 paragraphs. Okay? You'll have the proposal. You'll have all 3 of these, and each of them might be 1 or 2 paragraphs. Each of them will have quotations that come from your research. Your research is where you looked for definition, evaluation, and proposal, and you also found opposition that go with 1, 2, or all 3 of these, because you need to deal with opposition as well.